The morning after my brother's engagement party, I sat in my car in the driveway of my parents' house and watched the number on my phone screen for a long time. $62,411 gone. Not transferred by accident, not a bank error, not fraud from some stranger overseas. Gone because my mother had the password to my online banking, and she'd known exactly what she was doing when she moved it. I'd driven 4 hours from Ottawa to Sudbury for that party. I'd bought the flowers, the cake, the Prosecco. I'd given a toast that made my future sister-in-law cry the good kind of tears. And somewhere in between the appetizers and the dancing, my mother had sat down at the desk in her bedroom and emptied the account I'd been building for 6 years. I didn't cry when I saw it. That surprised me later. That I didn't cry. I just sat there in the driveway with the engine running, watching the number like it might change. It didn't change. Let me tell you who I was before all of this, because I think it matters. I'm a registered nurse. I've worked at the Civic since I was 23. Nights mostly, the kind of shifts where you learn pretty fast that nobody is coming to save you. You either figure it out or someone gets hurt. I bought my own groceries at 19, my own laptop at 20, and I started putting money into a TFSA the week I got my first real paycheck because a coworker named Bev told me I'd regret it if I didn't. I regretted a lot of things. That wasn't one of them. Growing up, my parents called me the responsible one. My brother got the charm. I got the responsibility. It sounds like a compliment. It isn't, really. What it means is, you're the one we call when something goes wrong. You're the one who figures it out. You're the one who doesn't make a fuss. My dad had struggled with gambling for as long as I could remember. Not the kind you'd see in a movie. No casino chips, no sunglasses at a poker table. His was quieter. Sports betting mostly. Online, he'd have good stretches where you'd almost forget about it, and then there'd be a bad month, and my mother would go very still at dinner and not quite meet anyone's eyes, and you'd know. We didn't talk about it directly. That was the rule nobody wrote down. I'd helped before. Small amounts or what felt small at the time. 500 here, 1,000 there, always framed as a loan, always repaid eventually, so I told myself it was fine. I told myself we were managing it. I told myself a lot of things. The account my mother emptied was my house fund. I'd been saving for it since I was 25. I had a spreadsheet. I tracked every deposit, every bit of interest, the way it crept up slowly, and then started moving faster once I had enough that the compound growth actually meant something. I was 31. I'd been pre-approved by my credit union. I'd started working with a realtor in Westboro. I had a showing booked for the following Tuesday. $62,411. That was the down payment on the first place I would ever call mine. I need to explain how she had access, because I know it's the first thing people ask. It's fair. I've asked it myself, in the dark, at 3 in the morning. More times than I want to admit. 4 years ago, my dad had a bad stretch, worse than usual. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and her voice was the voice she used when she was trying not to panic, which meant she was panicking. The utilities were going to be cut off. There were 2 overdraft notices. She didn't know what to do. I transferred money that day. I set up a temporary joint access to my checking account. Not my TSA, not the house fund, just checking. So she could handle things without having to call me every time something needed to be paid. It was supposed to be temporary. A few weeks, she said. Just until they got back on their feet. I forgot to remove it. That's the part I have to sit with. I forgot. The crisis passed, things went back to normal, and I moved the login information to a note in my phone and stopped thinking about it. And somewhere in those 4 years, my mother figured out that the password worked for more than just checking. Or maybe she'd known all along. I still don't know. I've never been able to bring myself to ask directly, and she's never offered. The morning after the engagement party, I went back inside the house for breakfast. My mother had made eggs. My dad was reading something on his tablet. My brother and his fiancée were still upstairs sleeping, which was probably for the best, because what happened next was not something I'd want them to witness. I sat down at the table. I put my phone face up next to my plate. I waited until my mother sat down across from me, and then I turned the phone toward her and said, quietly, "I need you to explain this to me." She looked at the screen. She didn't flinch. That's the part that still lives in my chest, like something I can't quite dislodge. She looked at the number and she didn't flinch. "Your father had a situation," she said. "What kind of situation?" She set down her fork. "He owes money to some people he shouldn't owe money to. It was serious. It needed to be handled. That was $62,000. I know what it was. That was my house." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and she said, and I'm going to give you the exact words because I've turned them over in my mind every day since. She said, "You're young. You'll build it back. You still have your income." My dad was still looking at his tablet. I pushed back my chair very carefully. I picked up my phone. I walked upstairs, packed my bag, and I left before my brother came down for breakfast. I sent him a text that said something had come up at work, and I was sorry to miss the morning. I have not told him what happened. Not yet. I drove 4 hours back to Ottawa with the radio off. I called my credit union that afternoon. I needed to understand exactly what had happened, what my options were, what, if anything, could be undone. The woman I spoke to was kind in the way that people are when they're trained to be kind, but also when they genuinely feel bad for you. She walked me through it patiently. The transfers had been made over 3 days, in amounts just under $10,000 each to avoid triggering automated flags. 6 transfers. Methodical. careful. My mother is not a stupid woman. I contacted a lawyer the following week. I want to be honest with you. I did not want to. I sat with the idea of it for days, this particular kind of grief that comes when you realize you might have to choose between protecting yourself and protecting the version of your family you'd always hoped existed. But I went. I sat across from a woman in a small office on Elgin Street, and I explained the situation as clearly as I could. She told me that what my mother had done was, technically, theft. That the existence of joint access did not give my mother the legal right to transfer funds without my knowledge or consent. That I had options, including filing a police report. I didn't file a police report. I'm not going to explain that decision in a way that's meant to be admirable, because it wasn't about being a good person. It was about the fact that my grandmother is 80 years old, and she doesn't know any of this happened, and I didn't want her to find out her daughter might be charged with fraud. I'm allowed to make that choice. I know that. It just doesn't make it feel clean. What I did do, I sent my mother a formal letter, drafted by the lawyer, outlining the amount taken and my expectation that it be repaid. I closed the joint account. I changed every password I have ever shared with anyone in my family. I removed my parents from my emergency contact at the hospital. That last one was harder than the lawyer letter. My mother called me twice in the week after I sent the letter. I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was explanatory. She went through the whole situation again. My dad's debt, the people he owed, the urgency, as though the problem was that I simply hadn't understood. The second message was a different tone, quieter. She said she knew she should have asked. She said she thought I would have said no. She said she didn't know what else to do. I've listened to that second message more times than I should have. Here's what I want to say about it, because I think it's the thing people don't always want to hear. I understand why she did it. I don't mean I forgive it. And I don't mean it was okay. And I don't mean she had the right. I mean I can trace the logic of it. She was scared. She'd been managing my father's gambling alone for 30 years and she was scared. And she knew I had money. And she knew I would say no if she asked, so she didn't ask. She just did it and hoped I would. What? Be okay with it eventually? Understand? She thought my love for her would be bigger than $62,000. Maybe it is. I genuinely don't know yet. What I know is that you don't get to decide that someone else's love is bigger than what you took from them. That's not yours to decide. I want to tell you about the Tuesday showing I had to cancel. The realtor was a woman I'd been working with for about 2 months. She was no nonsense, knew the Westboro and Hintonburg markets well, sent me listings on Sunday mornings with little notes about which ones she actually thought were worth my time. I liked her a lot. When I called to cancel, she could hear something in my voice, and she asked if I was all right. I said I'd had a family thing come up and I needed to step back from the search for a bit. She said, "Take all the time you need." I cried after I hung up. Not about the house, exactly. About the Tuesday. About the version of that Tuesday that had existed in my mind for weeks. Me walking through a door, standing in a kitchen that might be mine, imagining what it would be like to be somewhere that no one could come in without being invited. That Tuesday was gone and I'd had nothing to do with it. I've thought a lot about that in the months since. About how the harm wasn't only financial. The money is recoverable, eventually. Not fast, not without sacrifice, but it's recoverable. What's harder to recover is the timeline. The 6 years of discipline and patience and small choices that added up. The specific future I had built inside my head. The trust I'd had that my family was, if flawed, fundamentally safe. You can't go back to believing something you've stopped believing. That's not how it works. I started talking to a therapist in January. Her office is on Bank Street and I go on Thursday afternoons when I'm coming off a night shift, still a little hollowed out the way nights leave you. And I find that I say truer things in that state than I do when I'm well rested and composed. She has a plant on the windowsill that I've watched grow new leaves since we started, and I find that comforting in a way I can't entirely explain. We talk a lot about the pattern. Not just this incident, the whole shape of it. The way I became the person who absorbed things. The way I learned young that being reliable was my value to my family, that if I stopped being the one who handled things I wasn't sure what I was to them. The way that belief made me keep the joint account long after I should have closed it, because closing it would have meant saying out loud, "I don't fully trust you." And I didn't know how to say that to my mother. My therapist asked me once, "What would have happened if you'd said no?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't, not completely. What I have is the understanding that I needed to find out. That I'm still finding out. It's been 8 months. My mother has repaid $11,000. It came in irregular amounts, 500 here, 1,000 there. In a way that made me realize she must be hiding it from my dad. Because it moved the way money moves when someone is siphoning it quietly from somewhere it won't be noticed. I don't know how I feel about that. There are too many feelings layered on top of each other. I've spoken to her 3 times since I sent the letter. Short conversations. Not cold, but careful. She asks about work. I answer. I ask about my grandmother. She answers. We have not spoken about the money directly since the morning at the kitchen table. I don't know if we will. I don't know if it would help. My brother still doesn't know. His wedding is in June. I'm going to stand up at the front of that church, and I'm going to smile, and I'm going to mean it because I love my brother. Genuinely, and whatever happened between me and my mother has nothing to do with who he is or what that day means. But I'm going to drive myself there and back, and I'm going to stay in my own hotel room. And if my mother sits down next to me at dinner, I'm going to be polite and warm and absolutely, completely guarded. That's the tax I've decided to pay. I moved at the end of February. Not into a house. I'm not there yet. Into a one-bedroom apartment in Centertown, 3rd floor, south-facing, with a window that gets the afternoon light in a way that still catches me off guard some days. It's mine. My name is the only name on the lease. My emergency contacts are 2 friends from the hospital. A woman I've worked beside for 4 years, who would show up with no questions at 2 in the morning if I needed her to. I've started a new savings account. The balance is not impressive, but it exists, and it's mine, and I'm the only person in the world who has the password. There's something I want to say before I stop, something that took me a while to find the words for. I spent a lot of time after this happened asking myself how I could have been so careless, how a grown woman with a spreadsheet and a financial plan and a pre-approval letter could have forgotten to close a joint account. How someone who prided herself on being responsible could have been this. What? Stupid? Naive? I've scribbled through a lot of words, but here's where I've landed. Slowly, over these 8 months, I didn't forget to close the account because I was careless. I forgot because I was still hoping. I was hoping that what happened 4 years ago was the last time. I was hoping my dad's good stretch would hold. I was hoping my mother and I were the kind of people who didn't need to protect themselves from each other. That hope was the thing that cost me $62,000 and a Tuesday showing in Westboro. Hope is not the same as trust, and trust is not the same as safety. I know that now in a way I can't unknow. My grandmother keeps a garden on the east side of her house, dahlias and black-eyed Susans in the summer, and every year she cuts them back completely in October, and they come back in May without being asked. She does not know what happened between me and my mother. She probably never will. But I think about that garden sometimes, the way things can be cut down entirely and still find their way back up from the same roots, whether they come back changed, or just the same plant again, wearing a new season. I'm still figuring out which one I am. But my window gets afternoon light, my lease is in my name, my savings account has a password nobody else knows, and this October, when the flowers come back, I'm going to be ready.